What's up, guys? I'm Mr. Second Passport. A lot of people think when you move to a place like Ecuador, right, you're just going to rent and not buy. Okay, and so now you're immune from all the scams, right, and all the bad things from happening. It's not true. It is a good idea to rent instead of buying when you first come to Ecuador. And of course, if you do get scammed, the amounts will probably be a lot less. I'm going to cover 6 today that are super common, and several of them actually happened to me, right, since I first came to Ecuador as a younger single guy in his 20s. So let's take a look. Number one, this personally happened to me, right? One of the first places that I rented in Ecuador, I rented a room inside an apartment with a friend of mine who rented another room, and then there was this girl in another room. So there were 3 rooms, and she subleased the 2 rooms. Now she charged us a security deposit, and she charged me and my other friend the monthly rent, and we were paying, and then one day to the next, we find out that she was 6 months behind on her rent and about to get legally evicted by the owner, and on top of that, she had never asked for authorization to sublease to us in the first place. So we were not legally there anyway. So needless to say, we lost our money and the rent and the deposit that we had paid for the month, and we basically had to leave. And this was just one of the first rental experiences I had in Ecuador, and it was not a very good one, to say the least. So obviously you can avoid this by just renting the whole unit, right? Most of you watching this probably have the money to do that. When I first came to Ecuador, I pretty much had nothing, so I was going super budget with a friend of mine my age. But anyway, that's the first scam. And I think it's actually quite common down here that people sublease without the proper authorization. Number 2 also happened to me several years later. Basically what happened is me and my now wife at the time were living together, and we just got this place in Quito, and then a month later we didn't like it because there were a lot of not so savory people and drug dealers nearby, working the corners, and we didn't like that, so we just wanted to move to a different area, Quito. And we were only there a month, and we had agreed to pay 1 month security deposit when we went in, and another month security deposit when we in the following month. But since we weren't going to stay, we just said we're going to leave. And the owner when I told her this, I was in her car for some reason, and she locked her car and said, "No, you're going to pay me right now." And she demanded that I pay the 2nd month security deposit, even though we were already on our way out and we were leaving, right? So obviously I told her, to F off, and I got out of the car and we left, but it was not a very pleasant experience, and of course we lost our first month's deposit as well, even though they really have no legal right to keep that, per the law in Ecuador. Even though you leave early and terminate a contract early in Ecuador, they still don't have a right to keep that. The laws greatly favor the tenant in Ecuador, so something to think about. Number 3, this happened to one of my subscribers who recently wrote me. Basically, they had a problem with their landlord who kept gringoing them, according to the guy, basically just trying to up the rent excessively on the guy, and it was getting super annoying. And the problem was the subscriber didn't have any written lease, legalized, notarized lease. And so what happened was, after a certain time that he was living there, the landlord started to bother him and started to do illegal things like trying to raise the rent excessively in consecutive months and things like that. So make sure you insist on getting a written, notarized lease, and make sure that it meets the Ecuadorian law of 2 years. Not just a 1-year lease. Get that 2-year lease. It protects you much more, the tenant, than it does the owner itself. So go for that longer term. The owner can't come at you for that unused time if you do decide to leave. That's just kind of how it works here in Ecuador. So it's definitely in your benefit as the tenant to ask for that longer lease, right? If you unoccupy and leave the place as you found it, generally in Ecuador, leases are just termed null and void, right? And that's it. Number 4, this happened to a friend of mine. He knows who he is. He watches the channel quite a bit. And that is his landlord. He rented a house here in the Quito area, and his landlord kept coming around too much, too nosy, all the time, just coming around, doing yard work supposedly, fixing stuff. It was just weird, and he didn't like it, and he felt kind of violated with the privacy, and so he moved, right? So again, this can happen too, especially if you live right next to a landlord. So you might want to think twice before living right next to a landlord, or in his situation, the landlord didn't live that nearby, but he still bothered him. So just if you can kind of set the boundaries pretty strong. Also happened to a friend of mine where he had just signed the lease, just moved all his stuff, a whole container of stuff, into a place here in Quito. And then a month or two later, the owner says they want him to leave, and because they want to live in there themselves or something, or a relative. It's very common in Ecuador. He's basically getting booted out of his place. So again, that written notarized lease can help protect you from these shenanigans, which are actually super common here in Ecuador. So something to think about. And the last one is happened to me personally. It's super embarrassing. It was actually like the first place I rented in Ecuador when I first arrived to Guayaquil, actually. I had rented again a room, recent arrival, fresh off the boat, so to speak, with very little money, young, single guy. And I rented a room from this guy in his apartment, middle-aged, single guy in Guayaquil. And he was a little strange, but nothing too bad. But one night when I was sleeping, I turn over and I see this hand reaching for my crotch. And I was like, whoa, what are you doing? And he was sleeping on the floor of my room. I don't know how he got in there or when he got in there, but it was super weird. And he was obviously trying to do things that he shouldn't. And it was totally fucked up. And I ended up leaving the next morning, right, from that place. But again, things like that can happen in Ecuador, I guess. So obviously it's a little embarrassing. It's the first time that ever, and only time that's ever happened to me in Ecuador, or in my life, pretty much. What can you learn from a fucked up situation like that? Probably just don't rent rooms, and you want to stick to renting whole units. And I really like those locks that you put on doors if you're not totally 100% from the people you're renting from, that you can lock from the inside that no one can have a key to, like those little chain locks. Because you don't know how many other people have that key when you're renting, so especially like a furnished unit. So you just, better safe than sorry. Those are 6 actually probably pretty common rental fucked up things that happen, or you could call them scams, I guess, here in Ecuador, and things that have personally happened to me while renting. And so again, another thing you can do when you first move down here is just Airbnb it for a few months. Airbnb it for a few months, and it might turn into a longer term thing. You can negotiate with the owner directly face to face once you're in there, and you can often just keep extending, and they're happy to have you. So, and everything's all the bills are paid, it's all included, it's all furnished. And if you don't like it, you can just leave and you don't have to pay any security deposit. So that's why in one of my videos I said you shouldn't buy or rent when coming to Ecuador. Actually, I do think, and it's not because I have Airbnbs, but I do think you should Airbnb when moving abroad in general, before you define where exactly you want to live in the city you've chosen, and just so you don't have any bad rental experiences like the ones that I've had that I just explained today. It's also nice to have that intermediary Airbnb in the middle of any shenanigans that might take place between you and the landlord. and usually they take care of it. And hint, hint, I know this from working with Airbnb, they actually often side way more with the tenant, with the renter, over the landlord in disputes. So anyway, I'm Mr. Second Passport. If you like that, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button below. Take care.